24 hours after taking delivery of his 2024 Model 3 Highland, he was rear-ended by a speeding Mitsubishi Outlander at high speed down a highway. When the police arrived, they questioned both drivers to find out how the crash happened. The Mitsubishi driver told them he'd done nothing wrong, aside from failing to see the car ahead of him, of course. This prompted the police to ask Shimon why he'd been in front of the Mitsubishi. Shimon was so new to his Tesla that he didn't know how to use the Tesla Cam feature yet. Later, after finding the footage, it proved crucial for the police investigation and his insurance claim. The Mitsubishi driver's insurance provider took full responsibility. Sadly, the Tesla was deemed a total loss, but the other driver's insurance coverage maxed out at $25,000. In the end, Shimon's own insurance coverage had to cover the rest. In this one, our submitter was headed to his daughter's birthday party and he was following traffic ahead of him in the HOV lane. Suddenly, the entitled rider of a Yamaha R6 motorcycle approached from behind. The biker was lane splitting, but evidently he wasn't happy that the large Cybertruck hadn't made room for him, as he had to slow down and wait before squeezing between the Cybertruck and the pickup next to it. The biker was so triggered, he punched the Cybertruck's side view mirror as he rode past it. By the way, lane splitting is legal in California, but there's no legal requirement for drivers to make room for motorcycles that are splitting lanes. In fact, in some cases, it's discouraged. Don't believe us? Be sure to comment without looking it up first. Even so, our submitter was already driving as close to the outside lane line as he could without breaking the law and crossing it, but evidently that wasn't good enough. In fact, the rider's feelings were so hurt, he felt the need to slap another vehicle's mirror up ahead. Poor baby. Our submitter kept his cool and continued to his daughter's birthday party, then called the California Highway Patrol to report the incident after returning home. The CHP suggested he give his Tesla Cam footage to the Oakland office, but when he did, they told him that there wasn't anything they could do since the video doesn't show the motorcycle's plate number. If you can identify the rider, his license plate, his tattoos, the bike stickers, or anything else relevant, your help would be appreciated. Just send us the information and we'll forward it along. I can't believe I finally get to say this, but roll the next Cybertruck video. Jackie was driving her brand new Cybertruck to work and was about to pass her college town's college campus when the unthinkable happened. A college freshman excited for finals week blew through her stop sign without looking at the road or noticing Jackie's bright, shiny truck. Both drivers pulled over to call the police, swap information, and file insurance claims. Even though they were both shaken up, neither was injured. Her Ford Focus was totaled, while Jackie's Cybertruck's frunk was dented. Thankfully, it was still drivable. The repair bill for the Cybertruck came to $12,000 and repairing it took Tesla about a month. James was driving his Model 3 on the highway in Battle Creek, Michigan. He and other drivers were obeying the speed limit, which had been temporarily lowered for a construction zone. Evidently, a truck driver thought James was driving too slowly, and when they got to the end of the construction zone, he merged into the passing lane to fly past James at well over the speed limit. With the construction zone behind him, James began accelerating back to the normal speed limit of 70 miles per hour. Before he'd finished passing James, the trucker merged back into the travel lane, hitting the driver's quarter panel and sending his Tesla spinning. After he'd spun a full 180 degrees, the semi-trailer hit one of the passenger side wheels, spinning the Tesla more and leaving it sideways on the left side of the road. The Tesla was still drivable, so James pulled off the road and stopped on the left shoulder, while the semi pulled over on the right shoulder a little farther down the road. James told us that he, his passengers, and even the trucker were all fine and not even bruised. The trucker claimed that James had been in his blind spot, which is interesting because if we can see the trucker's face in the Tesla Cam footage, he definitely should have been able to see the Tesla if he'd been paying attention. The police arrived 20 minutes later and immediately determined the trucker was at fault without even watching the footage. James started to drive home since he was pretty close already when the collision occurred, but after only a few seconds of driving, practically every warning and error message imaginable started popping up on his Tesla's screen. The Tesla ended up being totaled by James' insurance provider. Before gap coverage, he received an insurance settlement of $39,000. Gap insurance is an optional auto insurance add-on that kicks in if your car is stolen or totaled in a collision. If your remaining loan amount is more than your insurance payout, Gap coverage pays the difference so you don't have any debt left over. James truly believes that if his car's center of gravity hadn't been so low, he would have flipped over while going 70 miles per hour and the collision would have been much worse. He's already ordered a new Tesla Model Y. Lila was driving her Model Y down I-405 in Bothell, Washington, and rain was pouring down in rush hour traffic. She was driving at 65 miles per hour with the flow of traffic when the pickup in front of her swerved into the left lane without warning, revealing a traffic jam directly in front of her. Lila told us she couldn't swerve either way to avoid a collision because there were cars on both sides, so all she could do was hit the brakes before running into the Audi in front of her. Lila admits she was driving closer to the Jeep pickup than she should have been, but in her own defense, she told us that traffic will just cut in front of you on I-405 if you leave a gap any bigger than that. Nobody was injured, and Lila's phone called 911 as soon as it detected the collision. She then called her father to help her since she's only 16 years old and had never been involved in a collision before. We've gotta say, that's a spectacular wrap. If you know anything about it, let us know in the comments. A delivery van blew through the red light and collided with Brett's Model 3 as well as a red Ford Focus. The delivery driver claimed he'd attempted to slow down and stop for the light, but witnesses claimed they'd seen and heard him speed up in an attempt to get through the intersection before the traffic with the green light had started moving. Maybe the delivery driver couldn't hear that himself, as Brett pointed out he got out of the van wearing earbuds. Not only is driving with earbuds against his employer's policy, in many places it's also illegal. Brett is waiting for the insurance company to evaluate his Tesla, but he thinks they'll probably total it. The Model 3's right camera was destroyed during the collision, so the red Ford Focus can't be seen in the Tesla cam footage, but here's a look at the damage it sustained. Brett had only owned his Tesla for a little over a year, but he's thankful he was in a Tesla for this experience. He plans to buy a Model Y to replace it, which should cost about $37,000 after the federal tax credit. Cutlass was obeying the 40-mile-per-hour speed limit in his Model 3 Performance while on his way to work. He was glad the light ahead was still green as he approached, as it had stayed green for over 20 seconds. Even as he was celebrating the long light, someone else ran their red light at full speed. By the time he noticed the Toyota, he had little time to react. He stood on the brake pedal and swerved, a move which probably saved the other driver's life. By turning right, he made sure his Tesla hit the rear end of the Toyota rather than the driver's door. You can see what we mean in the photos of the damage done to the Toyota. Cutlass's Tesla immediately called 911. After he escaped from the airbags, he was able to walk away almost completely unhurt, only sustaining some minor bruises. First responders arrived in under 5 minutes. When Cutlass's Model 3 reverted to low voltage mode, he was unable to use the screen as we can see in this photo, but he gave his USB drive containing his Tesla cam footage to the police. The Toyota driver was found fully responsible. The Toyota had actually spun around and collided with a Jeep as well, but thankfully neither of those drivers were hurt either. The Toyota itself didn't fare so well. After being hit by the Tesla on one side and the Jeep on the other, it was torn into pieces. Cutlass's Tesla was deemed a total loss, and the insurance company cut him a check for $35,000. Eddie was driving his Tesla Model Y in Gurnee, Illinois, on a road with a 45-mile-per-hour speed limit when he stopped for a traffic light. Just as he stopped, he noticed something huge approaching in his rearview mirror. Ignoring both Eddie's Model Y and the red light, a semi plowed straight into the back of the SUV. Witnesses to the collision noticed fluids spilling from the truck, so they quickly pulled Eddie out of harm's way until first responders arrived a few minutes later. The truck was practically parked in the Tesla's back seat and had to be dragged out. Even though the Tesla had crumpled like an accordion, Eddie was able to walk away from the wreck without any serious injuries. Here's where the story takes a twist. The trucker told police that Eddie had cut in front of him, and he didn't have time to stop. The Tesla cam video clearly shows the trucker didn't try to slow down or stop, and he was in for a shock when Eddie presented this footage as evidence of what had really happened. The police cited the trucker for failing to reduce speed, expired registration, and for not having insurance. Although Eddie was able to walk away from the crash, injuries appeared later, including whiplash and a sore shoulder, for which he's now receiving treatment. Eddie's insurance provider was very happy for the video evidence, and they also found the trucker responsible. They totaled the Tesla once the repair bill exceeded $41,000 US. Brian and his girlfriend Jen were driving east on I-70, headed home from a ski trip, when a Subaru driver lost control while attempting to pass traffic in the left lane. The Subaru slammed into the left quarter panel of the Model Y, ultimately sending the Tesla into the concrete barrier. Thankfully, nobody was injured, but the Tesla was rendered undrivable by the impact. The driver of the Subaru was very apologetic and accepted full responsibility. It took the Colorado State Patrol 30 minutes to respond. When the officer asked Brian what had happened, Brian told him, "Why don't you just have a seat in my car and I'll show you?" After watching the video, the officer replied, "Wow, that sure explains it." With that, he had no further questions. Carlos was driving his Tesla Model 3 home from work on what had been a normal day in Austin, Texas. As he drove down the I-35 on-ramp, he thought nothing of it when he merged in front of a white Mazda. Evidently, the Mazda driver was highly offended by Carlos's merge, kicking off some of the most reckless road rage we've ever seen on this channel. The temper tantrum you're about to see would end up causing a massive highway crash involving 7 vehicles. But you'll be shocked to find out what the police did after the dust had finally settled. As Carlos approached the end of the on-ramp, the white Mazda was closely tailgating his Tesla before the driver crossed a solid line and started driving on the shoulder. After spraying rocks and dirt everywhere, the Mazda driver merged onto the interstate before accelerating in an attempt to get ahead of Carlos before he had a chance to legally enter the highway. The Mazda driver's first attack was an attempt to push Carlos's Tesla out of his lane, invading so far that Carlos had to swerve to avoid being sideswiped. Up to this point, Carlos had no idea that he'd been engaged in vehicular combat, but this move from the Mazda driver was his first indicator that something was very wrong. Carlos kept his cool and continued merging to the left while the Mazda driver took to the rightmost lane in a bid to pass Carlos. Sadly for him, that lane was actually an exit lane filled with slower moving traffic, and the Mazda ended up getting stuck behind Carlos again. Once he saw his opportunity, the Mazda driver floored the gas pedal and cut across the entire highway to get in front of Carlos in the passing lane. The Mazda driver then brake-checked Carlos to the point that Carlos had to come to a complete stop, all during rush hour in the passing lane of an interstate highway. I bet you can guess what happened next. Traffic behind Carlos wasn't able to stop, and a chain reaction of mayhem began to unfold behind him. A total of 6 vehicles behind Carlos collided with each other before his Tesla was rear-ended by a Toyota. Predictably, the Mazda driver chose not to stick around. Thinking quickly, Carlos punched the juice pedal to pursue the Mazda. But as the other driver dove across traffic to reach an exit, Carlos remembered his Tesla cam would have all the evidence he needed, and he pulled over. Police arrived quickly and closed I-35 down for over an hour. When Carlos showed them his Tesla cam footage, which he assumed would be the critical evidence they needed to hold the Mazda driver responsible, they told him they probably wouldn't go after the other driver. Carlos asked, "How is it possible for a person to get off untouched after causing such mayhem?" Their response was that since the Mazda hadn't been involved in the actual collision, they likely wouldn't pursue the driver at all. If you thought that story was crazy, just keep watching. We've lined up even more insane stories from Tesla owners. Roll 'em. Duff was just about to merge onto a highway when he noticed a cloud of sparks and heard a loud engine roaring past him. Duff told us the Camaro either had a tire rupture or the driver was going too fast and lost control after overcorrecting. Either way, the car smashed into a concrete wall. And although the driver wasn't hurt, he was definitely upset. Duff and another driver stopped to verify that only the Camaro driver's ego had been injured. He called the police and a friend to come give him a ride. MJ was driving his Tesla Model Y across a bridge near downtown Dallas. The full self-driving beta was enabled when a Mazda came up behind him at high speed. The driver of the Mazda lost control, overcorrected, then crashed into the back of the Tesla, effectively performing a pit maneuver at highway speed. MJ felt the Mazda impact his Tesla, and then he felt his car countersteer throughout the 180-degree spin, keeping itself stable. In his opinion, FSD Beta did a great job getting the vehicle under control and keeping the wreck from getting any worse. Thankfully, nobody was injured. Both drivers stopped and exchanged insurance information. With the help of the police, they safely moved off the bridge. Hold on to your handlebars because this Tesla's about to wreck. Anthony was traveling down the right lane of a main road in his Model 3 Performance when the driver of a Dodge Caravan pulled out and made a wide turn toward the leftmost lane. The driver then changed his mind, ending up right where Anthony was headed. Anthony hit the brakes and swerved to the left, but he wasn't able to avoid colliding into the back of the Dodge. All the Tesla's airbags deployed. Workers from a nearby construction zone witnessed the collision and ran to help. Anthony called 911 and first responders arrived moments later. Thankfully, they didn't discover any injuries while assessing his condition. Dom was on his way to work when an old lady drove straight into his Cybertruck. A local news reporter found out about the Cybertruck crash and rushed to the scene, no doubt excited to show a wrecked Cybertruck on the front page, but he was in for a shock. While the old lady's Toyota Camry was absolutely obliterated, Dom's Cybertruck was almost completely untouched. The only damage was some scratches on the plastic bumper cover. The journalist even wrote, "Looks more like a Toyota Camry hit a Sherman tank." He ended his article with, "Note to self, don't get in an accident with a Cybertruck." Dom confirmed that driving a Cybertruck feels like driving a tank. He's thankful that nobody was injured in the collision. The Camry was totaled by the impact, and Dom is now waiting to find out when he can get his bumper cover replaced at a Tesla service center. Two pedestrians began jaywalking across the road just as our submitter's light turned green. While taking their time crossing in front of our submitter's Tesla, they made gestures while yelling something unintelligible. One of them began walking toward the car. Our submitter tried to get out of the way, but the man ran up and kicked the Tesla's fender. The impact even knocked the repeater camera out of alignment when the guy kicked and dented the fender. Our submitter did not think stopping would be a good idea, so after reaching a safe location, he made a police report and an insurance claim noting the damage. The vandal hasn't been located, so our submitter ended up paying his insurance deductible to get the damage repaired. He might be facing an increase in his insurance premiums as well. In the end, our submitter paid out of his own pocket after this random man kicked his car. Our submitter would love to press charges, so if you know who this man is, please let us know and we'll pass the information along. Casey was driving his 3-day-old Cybertruck in Covington, Louisiana when he started to slow down for a red light. Sadly, the Ford driver behind him didn't. Casey estimates the Ford driver only braked for half a second before crashing into the back of his Cybertruck. Both drivers pulled over at a nearby gas station, and the station owner happened to be standing at the side of the road and witnessed the whole thing. The station owner walked to the back of Casey's pickup to inspect the damage, and when Casey got out to talk to him, he said, "There's no damage. I want a vehicle like this." Casey just had to laugh at the whole ordeal. Let's listen in on what he had to say after the collision.
Well, this is cute, y'all. I just got rear-ended. But, you want to know something? Unbelievable.
Thankfully, nobody was hurt. After a state trooper arrived and wrote a report, both drivers were able to drive away, but Casey doesn't think the Ford driver made it very far considering how much coolant he'd lost. The local Tesla authorized body shop wanted Casey to drop off his Cybertruck for 3 to 4 months so they could order parts, then find time to work on it. Casey asked them if they could just remove the bumper cover and examine the damage, then put it back so he could drive it while they waited for the parts. But they told him if they took the bumper cover off, they wouldn't be putting it back on until repairs were complete. Rather than waiting 3 to 4 months, Casey decided to repair the damage himself. He filed an insurance claim, but since the Cybertruck is a newly released vehicle, the insurance company has no idea how much the parts will cost, and Casey had to figure it out himself. What about you? Would you dare attempt to repair your own Cybertruck? Thankfully, Casey runs the Tesla Rebuilders Discord community, so this won't be his first foray into fixing faulty four-wheeler. Paul was driving with full self-driving enabled, testing the latest version and collecting footage for his YouTube channel, but he wasn't expecting to capture a wham-bam moment.
Jesus Christ. F***ing A.
A Honda driver suddenly stopped to yield to pedestrians. Paul slammed on the brakes and swerved to the left as a collision warning sounded.
Jesus Christ.
At first, Paul didn't think his Tesla had touched the Honda since he hadn't felt or heard an impact, and the visualization on the screen appeared to show a gap between the two vehicles, so he continued. When the Honda driver began following him and honking, he realized they must have made contact, so he pulled over. While FSD can definitely anticipate many things, Paul told us neither he nor FSD expected that the Honda driver would suddenly stop during a right turn the way he had. Paul thinks the Honda driver had been turning too fast to begin with, then had to slam on the brakes when the pedestrian stepped off the sidewalk. Paul made 3 observations. 1. The Honda driver could have safely stopped farther to the right out of the way of traffic. 2. The setting sun made the Honda's brake lights difficult to see. And 3. The high-mounted center stoplight was practically invisible behind a dark window tint. Once they were both pulled over, the 2 drivers inspected their vehicles for damage. Paul realized he'd been the perpetrator of a reverse Honda bump. Thanks to his paint protection film, there was no damage to the paint of either car. Small smudges were easily wiped off them both. Paul decided to leave the scratch in his PPF rather than paying to get it replaced. According to the law, Paul would be considered responsible for causing this collision. Check out his channel Supercharged Travels to see more FSD videos. Thanks for sharing, Paul. Dave was commuting to work when traffic slowed down for a major collision scene up ahead. Dave quickly realized traffic wasn't just slowing down, the road had been completely shut down and traffic was coming to a standstill. The driver of a Toyota behind Dave decided ain't nobody got time for that and began making a U-turn across a double yellow line. What he hadn't noticed were the oncoming police cars approaching at high speed, lights and sirens active. I bet he noticed after he clipped one of them. The collision was so loud, David panicked thinking he'd been hit, or was about to be, and he quickly accelerated to get out of the way. After realizing what had happened, Dave rushed over to assist the officer. He was stunned by the collision, but he gave Dave a thumbs up before climbing onto his vehicle's roof to get out of the marsh. Another officer stopped to check on the Toyota driver, who was also fine, but we're guessing he got a hefty fine after that reckless move. As a side note, Dave told us he was 20 minutes into his commute when this occurred. And FSD version 12.4.1 is so good, this was the first time he'd needed to even touch the pedals or steering wheel. Andrew was driving with supervised full self-driving engaged. He was on his way to Little Caesars to get lunch for him and his roommates, but he had no idea this trip would turn his life upside down. A Prius driver, distracted by something in her passenger seat, veered into Andrew's lane and struck his Tesla head-on. The Tesla automatically called 911, and while first responders were still on the way, bystanders helped Andrew out of the vehicle. The Prius driver was acting very suspiciously. While only partially dressed, she seemed to be avoiding the situation by making her way to the sidewalk. Andrew was taken away in an ambulance and had to stay under medical supervision for 8 days, resulting in a $16,000 medical bill. When a police officer came to the hospital and gave him the Prius driver's insurance info, he immediately called the number.
Hello.
Hello, is this Alexis?
That's when he discovered that the Prius driver had given the cops a fake number. He then read the police report and found out she'd been wearing an ankle bracelet and GPS tracker. What he found out next hit him like a ton of bricks. The Prius driver was uninsured. Without uninsured motorist coverage, this left him on the hook for paying his medical bills. If you don't know, uninsured motorist coverage protects you if you're involved in a collision with a driver who's illegally driving without required insurance. It can help cover medical expenses and missed wages. In contrast, Andrew's own insurance coverage only covered the repairs to his Tesla. The local Tesla certified body shop estimated the repair costs at $46,000 before his insurance provider decided to total it.
Bon voyage, old friend.
Joseph's mother was taking her daughter to an interview and was using the full self-driving feature on her brand new Tesla Model S. She first encountered the matte black Range Rover before getting on the Prospect Expressway in Brooklyn. And does that license plate say LOL? Well, at the time she didn't really notice it, and why would she? The Range Rover was behind her as the Tesla took them safely to their destination. It wasn't until they'd entered the expressway that she began paying attention to the Range Rover as it tailgated other vehicles in the passing lane. Once a Honda moved over, the Range Rover driver began tailgating a van, finally overtaking it only to get stuck behind a Volvo that wasn't moving fast enough for him. Zooming in reveals the Range Rover driver flipped off the Volvo driver, but while he was distracted by his gesturing, he nearly ran into Joseph's mother's Model S. He tried to take control and swerve back into the passing lane, but his overcorrection sent the Range Rover smashing into both the Tesla and the Honda next to it. The Range Rover driver exited his SUV unhurt and couldn't be bothered to check on Joseph's mother and sister. If he had, he would have discovered they'd both been hurt in the collision and they ended up being transported to the hospital by ambulance. They called Joseph and he came in his own Model S in case they needed help. When he arrived, the Range Rover driver was claiming that the Volvo driver had hit him before fleeing the scene and that's why he lost control. Joseph tried to access the Tesla cam footage, but by then the car had shut down, and he wasn't able to remove the storage device containing the footage as it was locked in the glove box. With no way to access the video files, Joseph turned his attention to his relatives and went to see them at the hospital. Both had sustained multiple fractures and other injuries. A few days after the Tesla had been towed to a service center, they opened the glove box and called Joseph so he could come and retrieve the footage. When he watched the video, Joseph discovered the Range Rover driver had lied to the police and the insurance companies. When his insurance provider received a copy of the Tesla cam footage, they accepted responsibility immediately. Joseph is now having the police report modified to include the facts revealed by the footage, including that the Range Rover driver lied. His family is also pursuing legal action against the Range Rover driver for the emotional distress his actions caused. Trish was driving home when she heard a crash. When she checked her rearview mirror, she saw a car coming at her on two wheels. The Jeep tipped onto its side before sliding into the back of Trish's Tesla. She got out to check on the Jeep driver. Thankfully, he was fine. He turned out to be only 16 years old, and this was his first vehicle collision. It almost looked like he was going to save it. If he'd turned the wheel the other way, the car should have flipped back onto its wheels, but since the airbags had already deployed after the initial impact, we're guessing it was impossible for the driver to see what was going on. Trish wanted to shout out her son Max, who convinced her to send in her Tesla cam video. Good work, Max. Thanks for the support. Trish filed a claim with the Jeep driver's insurance provider and is currently waiting for a repair estimate from Tesla. John was driving his Model Y early one morning in Charlotte, North Carolina, when he merged right to reach his upcoming exit. Suddenly, the driver of a red Mazda began cutting into his lane, then overcorrected when he noticed the Tesla and went spinning. The Mazda collided with John's front left wheel and spun him out while the Mazda continued to hit another vehicle, making this a three-vehicle collision. Police and firefighters responded, and based on the morning lighting of these photos, it looks like they took a while to arrive. The state trooper watched this footage in John's Tesla before finding the Mazda driver responsible and issuing him multiple citations. John wasn't hurt, but the same can't be said for his Tesla. The impact damaged the vehicle's suspension, lighting up his dashboard like a Christmas tree and rendering the vehicle undrivable. The initial repair estimate was around $34,000, leading to the insurance company totaling John's Tesla. Since it wasn't even 2 weeks old and only had 1,300 miles on it, he got a check for the full value of the vehicle. When traffic ahead of Anthony began slowing to a stop, he noticed the car behind him was not slowing down, so he swerved onto the shoulder to avoid being rear-ended. Sadly, the other driver did the same thing before colliding with Anthony's Tesla, impacting the right rear wheel. Anthony's Tesla came extremely close to colliding with the vehicle ahead of him when the impact occurred. Thank goodness he pulled over when he did. Anthony checked on the other driver and found him extremely agitated, so he called 911. When the California Highway Patrol arrived, they found the other driver at fault after seeing the Tesla cam footage. They also cited him for expired registration. Thankfully, nobody was injured. It took 7 months and $13,000 to repair Anthony's Tesla. He told us the worst part of the whole ordeal was having to drive a Nissan Versa while waiting for his Tesla to get fixed. Anthony told us that Wham Bam rocks, and he probably recommends you subscribe. And he told us he's thankful to be back in his Tesla. Najee was driving his Model Y in Pembroke Pines, Florida. He was behind a pickup driver who was waiting to turn left when the driver suddenly slammed the gas. The pickup driver crashed straight into a Tesla Model X that had been approaching at high speed. Looking at the replay of the collision, the Model X can be seen approaching through the windows of the truck, so we have no idea how the pickup driver missed it. The Tesla spun a full 360 degrees, and the Falcon Wing doors opened after the impact. Incredibly, a nearby ambulance was able to respond in only 3 minutes. When the paramedics arrived, Najee left, so he doesn't know what else happened, but he told us the drivers of both vehicles seemed unhurt and able to walk away from the wreck. This submitter was driving his Tesla Model 3 Performance down Highway 101 in California on a normal day. Suddenly, the heavy traffic ahead came to an abrupt halt, and our submitter only managed to stop in time by applying heavy braking. The driver of the black 2024 Chevrolet ZR2 pickup truck behind him, California plate number 80710X3, did the same, but the pickup driver hadn't secured the load of lumber he was transporting on his roof, and it flew off the top of his truck when he slammed on the brakes. Some of the lumber speared into the back of our submitter's Tesla, while some slid underneath it, scraping the underside. Here's where things get crazy, and we're going to play the video uncut so you can enjoy one of the most insane pursuits we've shown you on this channel so far. Even though this video was given to the police as evidence, they ended up not charging the pickup driver because of one technicality. Keep watching to find out what it was. Our submitter, who asked us to call him O-Easy instead of his real name, pulled over to the shoulder and the pickup initially followed him. Once they'd both stopped, our submitter got out to inspect the damage, and that's when he heard the pickup's engine roar as the other driver took off. Our submitter ran and jumped back in his Tesla before speeding after the fleeing pickup driver. Our submitter was determined not to let the pickup get away. Thanks to the traffic conditions and his Tesla's powerful acceleration, it wasn't hard for him to stay on the other driver's tail. He called 911 and continued the pursuit while talking to the emergency operator. As they approached a red light, our submitter saw an opportunity to block the pickup in the turn lane and force it to a stop. Instead, the pickup driver drove over a curb and made a U-turn, heading back to the highway in another attempt to escape. Rather than following the truck over the curb, our submitter kept an eye on it in his rearview mirror as he made his way to the intersection, then made his own U-turn and hit the juice pedal to catch up. After barely managing to see the turn the pickup driver had taken, our submitter sped after him. The pickup driver eventually made his way into a residential area. As they continued through a school zone, our submitter continued urging the operator to send police, but he was still determined not to let the pickup driver get away. After circling back, the pickup driver attempted some evasive maneuvers before entering the same residential area as before. As they re-entered the school zone, the pickup driver suddenly slowed down and made a U-turn. Unsuccessful in his pitiful attempts to lose the Tesla, he finally pulled over and parked his slowmobile on the side of the road. This time, our submitter stayed in his car with the 911 operator still on the phone. Eventually, the other driver got out of his pickup. Once the driver was out of his pickup, he approached our submitter. He told us the pickup driver appeared intoxicated as he told him, "I'll give you my phone number." But our submitter just told him he'd be waiting for the police to arrive. "Okay," the other driver replied before walking back to his pickup. Our submitter was afraid the other driver was about to take off again, so he maneuvered to block his pickup, but the driver reversed instead before once again running off like a scared little boy. Our submitter made a U-turn and resumed the pursuit. They flew past the school zone again, and our submitter eased off the accelerator in an attempt to de-escalate the situation so the pickup driver wouldn't do anything stupid. Well, anything more stupid. Eventually, the 911 operator told our submitter to stop chasing the criminal, so he slowed down and allowed the hit-and-run driver to escape. The operator told our submitter a CHP officer would respond very soon and they'd immediately continue the pursuit. Well, that's not what happened at all. 45 minutes later, an officer arrived to take a report. Our submitter showed them his Tesla cam video, including the plate number and the other driver's face, but he was told there wasn't anything they could do. When he inquired as to why, they told him that the license plate returned to a pickup truck that was uninsured. That probably explains why the driver fled the scene, but we can't figure out why that would prevent the police from charging him with leaving the scene of a collision. Do you think you know? Let us know in a comment. Edwin had left his Tesla Model Y parked outside of his home in San Diego, California, when a guy walking past came up with a brilliant idea. He picked up a large rock and threw it into the Tesla before running away like a scared little boy. Edwin got a notification that his alarm had been triggered and ran out to find the rock lying in his car's back seat. Needless to say, it was not a pleasant discovery. Sadly, the coward responsible was long gone. Edwin called the police and made a report when officers responded. The initial repair bill is $3,000 US, but it might increase since the trim is scraped and the interior door panel is also damaged. If you recognize this criminal, send us a message or contact the San Diego Police Department. Carlos was driving his Tesla Model Y in Edison, New Jersey, when another driver approached him quickly from behind. Carlos watched as the driver lost control. He hit the juice pedal and avoided being rear-ended, but the Lexus on his right wasn't able to escape the careening car. The speeding Toyota slammed into the Lexus, pushing it into a power pole and crushing it before it rolled into the parking lot of an auto glass shop. To top it off, the transformer on the power pole exploded, sending a shower of sparks down onto the road and an echo through the neighborhood. Carlos pulled into the first available parking lot as people poured out of the building to see what had happened. Incredibly, neither driver was hurt. Carlos was able to flag down a passing cop, and he immediately pulled over to help. Carlos pulled up his footage of the collision and invited the officer into his Tesla to watch it. The officer was grateful and told him the video evidence made it easy for him to determine that the Toyota driver was at fault. This emitter was driving his Model Y with full self-driving enabled when his Tesla slowed down for a construction zone. The driver of the black VW Jetta following our submitter didn't follow suit. After bouncing off our submitter's Tesla, the Jetta collided with a semi-truck, then ricocheted back into the Tesla, pushing it into the grass in the median. Many first responders, including sheriff's deputies, state troopers, ambulances, the highway department, and tow trucks, all arrived at the scene. Eventually, traffic was directed around the collision scene on the right shoulder while an investigation was conducted and while cleanup was underway. Miraculously, both the Jetta driver and our submitter were able to walk away without any serious injuries. The investigation uncovered what really happened, and dashcam footage provided by another witness proved crucial to discovering the cause of the collision. The footage shows the witness driving at 75 miles per hour when the Jetta passed them at an even higher speed. The Jetta swerved into the left shoulder before the collision, and our submitter believes this was likely caused by distracted or impaired driving. The footage also reveals that the Jetta driver didn't brake until they were within a single car length of our submitter's Tesla. It's likely they were traveling around 80 miles per hour at the time of the collision. The investigation is still ongoing, but in the meantime, both vehicles have been deemed total losses. Considering the abundance of video footage, we're guessing the insurance companies won't have any problem determining who was at fault. Dinesh was headed home on I-290 after dropping his two kids off at their college apartment when he began to slow down for traffic up ahead. The driver of a Nissan Rogue noticed too late that traffic was slowing down. When he tried to slow down, he lost control and rear-ended Dinesh's Tesla. After the impact, the Nissan crossed 3 lanes of the highway and rolled into a ditch. The Nissan driver was uninsured, so Dinesh filed an insurance claim under his own insurance policy. Firefighters and paramedics responded, but thankfully, nobody was injured. The insurance company's initial repair quote was over $11,000. But once Dinesh's car made it to a Tesla collision center, their quote came to almost $40,000. Dinesh wanted to shout out the Sanani family. Alex had lent his brand new Model 3 to his friend Alexis so he could get to work. It was so new, in fact, that Alex hadn't even made the first payment yet. They were supposed to meet for lunch when Alex received a notification from his Tesla app that one of his tires had lost all pressure. Another driver had made an illegal left turn without checking for other traffic, colliding with Alex's Tesla and sending it spinning off the road and into a ditch. Shortly after, Alexis called Alex to inform him of the collision. Alexis didn't know what to do, so Alex quickly made his way to the scene of the wreck. Once he'd arrived, Alex witnessed the full extent of the damage while also discovering that Alexis was completely unhurt. The other driver, who'd been illegally driving without insurance, tried to put the blame on Alexis by accusing him of speeding. When the police took one look at Alex's Tesla cam footage, they quickly found the other driver completely responsible. When she admitted she'd been trying to make a left turn from a right turn only lane, they gave her a citation as well. The police credited the safety of Alex's Tesla for the fact that Alexis hadn't been injured at all. They also mentioned that, considering the way it had hit the ditch, they would have expected it to roll over. Thankfully, the car's low center of gravity kept it upright after the impact. The Tesla Collision Center estimated over $35,000 to fix Alex's Model 3 Highland, but since he has Tesla insurance, they were able to get the parts for half price. That brought the repair estimate down to about $22,000, which meant his Tesla wasn't totaled. After 4 months in the shop, it came back looking brand new. Man, Tesla insurance customers are so lucky. Psst, Tesla, please bring Tesla insurance to Washington State. Alex wanted to shout out his friend Alexis and told us he's glad he wasn't hurt in the collision. He's got no hard feelings toward his friend, and he's incredibly thankful to Tesla for making the safest vehicles on the road. Fidel had parked his Tesla on the street while visiting his mother's apartment, where there's usually no off-street parking available. The driver of a Dodge pickup hit Fidel's Model Y from behind before fleeing the scene. Fidel woke up the next morning to find a bunch of notifications on his Tesla app, and when he walked outside to check on his car, he was devastated. He filed a police report, but since the pickup's license plate number isn't visible in the Tesla cam footage, he still hasn't heard anything back. The repairs cost $27,000 and took 2 months to complete. Max was on his way home after picking up 2 avocados for $1 at a roadside fruit stand. He was riding in his Model S Plaid with full self-driving enabled and was discussing with his father in the passenger seat what a great bargain they'd gotten on the avocados. As the self-driving Tesla began slowing itself down for a red light, they noticed that a human-driven Jeep was not slowing down. The Jeep slammed into the back of the Tesla at a speed that Max estimates between 40 and 50 miles per hour. FSD swerved around the car ahead of them after being shoved forward. Max told us the Jeep driver had fallen asleep, and since his Jeep had no advanced driver assistance features, it wasn't able to help him avoid this devastating collision. Max called 911, and 2 cop cars and an ambulance arrived at the scene. Max and his father were shaken up, but uninjured. Together, they concluded that those were the most expensive avocados they'd ever purchased. In addition to the $1, they also cost 1 Tesla Model S Plaid. After all, they never would have been hit by that Jeep if they hadn't stopped for the avocados. Steven was driving his brand new Cybertruck in New Brighton, Minnesota. As he approached an intersection with stopped traffic, he moved over to the left lane. An oncoming driver began to turn left just as Steven approached her, leaving him with no way to avoid a collision. Her car literally bounced off the Cybertruck during the impact before immediately beginning to smoke. Steven told us he hit the brakes as soon as he saw her turning, but the wet road surface made it impossible for him to stop in time. Steven called 911, and the emergency operator told him they'd try to send police officers, but after an hour, Steven gave up waiting. There were no injuries, so the 2 drivers exchanged information before both driving away. The Tesla collision repair shop gave Steven an initial repair estimate of about $7,000, but he expects it to climb higher since they couldn't see all the damage in the photos he sent them. What really grinds Steven's gears is that he waited 4.5 years to take delivery of his Cybertruck. Now he's back to waiting to see when he'll get it back from the shop. Kenneth was driving his Model 3 in Santa Clarita, California when he was passed by 2 racing BMWs being driven by a father and his teenage son. The father, driving the Z4, collided with the rear of a stopped bus at about 65 miles per hour. The son, driving the 3 Series, was able to stop and avoid a collision. Responding deputies assumed the teenager had been driving the wrecked car, but the Tesla cam clearly shows him getting out of the 3 Series. The deputies were amazed and grateful for the video evidence. The Z4 was clearly totaled, and 2 other vehicles were also heavily damaged. Julian proceeded into an intersection when his light turned green, but so did a young driver on her phone before she T-boned the side of Julian's Model 3. The girl admitted she'd been on her phone and told Julian she'd seen a green light in her peripheral vision. The problem is that the light she'd seen had been for the turn lane, not for her. Law enforcement was quickly summoned by a school resource officer nearby. The police gave the other driver a citation for running a red light and causing a collision. Sadly, Julian's Tesla was totaled. He told us that even though losing his car made him sad, he's excited to replace it with a refreshed Model 3 Highland. Watch what happened when this submitter was driving his brand new Tesla Model 3 with fewer than 500 miles on it. Our submitter told us the impact seemed to come out of nowhere as the Lexus suddenly appeared without any time for him to avoid a collision or respond to any alerts. Police, firefighters, and paramedics all responded to the scene. There were no serious injuries, and everyone involved was able to walk away from the collision. Using our submitter's Tesla cam footage, it was easy for the police to determine who was at fault. The Lexus driver had clearly run a red light, hit the Hyundai, then careened head-on into our submitter's Tesla. The insurance claim is still being processed, but based on the damage to our submitter's Model 3, it's safe to assume it will be deemed a total loss. The General was driving his Model Y to work with the full self-driving beta active when the driver of a white Model Y in front of him slammed on the brakes. FSD had plenty of distance and quickly reacted, slowing down to avoid a collision. Sadly, the driver of a red Model 3 following the General swerved into the express lane and collided with a silver Model S. Both of those vehicles then made contact with the General's Model Y. Incredibly, nobody was harmed, even after the Model 3 was sent airborne. Teslas really are built like tanks. Firefighters and law enforcement responded to the scene. The General's Model Y was still drivable, so the police released him after taking his statement and a copy of his Tesla cam footage. The officer was pleased with the video and told the general it would make his job easier. That definitely seems to be the case, as the collision report was completed only 2 days later. The report stated the driver of the red Model 3 was fully responsible after making an unsafe lane change. Apparently, the driver had immediately admitted to his mistake and accepted liability. The footage from the white Model Y in front of the general has already been widely spread on the internet, but we haven't been able to get a hold of the owner. If we can get in contact with any of the other Tesla owners, we'll update this story with their footage in a future episode. Until then, let's continue. Mike's wife was driving in Sicklerville, New Jersey. When she pulled up to a red light, she heard police sirens in the distance before noticing 2 drivers fleeing from the police. One of the suspect vehicles was T-boned in the intersection and came within inches of crashing into Mike's wife. Incredibly enough, the suspect managed to make a full 360-degree spin before continuing to run from the cops. When the cop car arrived at the intersection, the officer slowed down to ask the other driver if he was okay. Once he'd answered that he was, the cop took off after the suspects. Mike called the police and offered them his Tesla cam footage, but they never returned his call. Alan's Tesla Model S Plaid rolled over after hitting a patch of ice on a winding mountain road, leaving him stranded alone for hours. Let's back up and start this story from the beginning. Alan was headed to his cabin in the Sequoia National Forest one evening. The forecasted low temperature was above freezing, and Alan still had summer tires on his Model S Plaid. He told us his Tesla never warned him about freezing conditions, but while he was coming around a bend, he hit a patch of ice and was sent sliding into the side of the mountain. The Tesla rolled onto its roof before righting itself. Less than 10 minutes later, it completely shut down, so even the heater was no longer running. It quickly became very cold, and there was no cell reception for miles in any direction. The wreck happened in a very remote area, and it was unlikely anyone would drive by, certainly not before daybreak. Thankfully, Alan was able to call for help on his satellite phone. It took a couple of hours for first responders to arrive. Thankfully, Alan only had minor cuts from glass and knives flying around and hitting his head. Where did the knives come from? Alan had been taking some dishes up to his cabin, and they were in boxes in his back seat. The impact sent them flying forward before they rolled around the car while it was rolling over. The responding highway patrol officer told Alan he was fortunate to hit the mountainside. If the ice patch had been on the prior curve, the car would have flown off the road and splashed down in the freezing cold Kern River below. The officer also told him that had happened the previous winter, and sadly, the family in that car didn't survive. The next day, Alan drove back to the scene of the wreck and found his car's air compressor that had been ripped off. He kept it as a souvenir and to remind him to be more careful while driving on mountain roads. The car was totaled after the repair bill exceeded $100,000 US. While Alan doesn't know if having all-season tires would have made a difference in this case, he made sure to get a set for his replacement vehicle, which is also a Model S Plaid. Good call, Alan. This Model 3 owner was driving down a highway outside of Genoa, Italy, when traffic slowed down as drivers passed through a toll station. A noisy, modified BMW in front of our submitter revved up as soon as it cleared the toll booth, but watch what happened next. The BMW driver lost control and collided with another car, then crashed into the barrier before bouncing back, finally stopping right in front of the car it had sideswiped. The victim was actually a student driver who'd been receiving a driving lesson from an instructor, and the vehicle was owned by the driving school. Now that's a driving lesson. Thankfully, nobody was injured. Everyone involved was able to immediately exit their vehicles. That's gotta be a rough way to experience your first vehicle collision. What do you think the driving instructor told the student after this happened? Christian's girlfriend was headed to work after borrowing his Model Y, but watch what happened right after she stopped for a red light. The driver of a red Nissan had fallen asleep at the wheel before crashing into her at full speed. Even though she had her foot on the brake pedal, the force of the impact pushed the Tesla forward and started a domino effect that involved 2 cars ahead of it as well. All the drivers were able to get out of their vehicles, which is a miracle considering the force of the impact. That's when the Nissan driver said they'd fallen asleep. Firefighters and paramedics responded, and Christian's girlfriend was the only driver who was injured in the collision. She was taken to the hospital with a broken pinky finger and is recovering just fine. They filed a claim with the Nissan driver's insurance provider. Christian hasn't received a repair estimate yet, but he's pretty sure his Model Y will be totaled. He wanted to shout out his girlfriend Grace for keeping her cool after the collision. This submitter was headed down a highway with his wife and their friend in the back when he realized he was about to miss his exit. Due to the weather conditions, he decided not to go for the exit. Rather than putting them all in a dangerous situation, he continued with the intent to take the next exit instead. His navigation immediately calculated a new route, and when he saw the next exit would be on the left, he let some traffic pass him so he could change lanes. After checking his blind spot multiple times, he began merging left to reach the upcoming exit. All of a sudden, he noticed a BMW quickly approaching. Even though he tried to speed up, he couldn't avoid a collision. In the Netherlands, the daytime speed limit is about 60 miles per hour, and that's how fast our submitter was going when he started changing lanes. He thinks the BMW was going over 105 miles per hour. His Tesla's collision data shows our submitter accelerated to about 74 miles per hour before the impact. Tesla support was automatically contacted, and the police responded in under 5 minutes with an ambulance arriving shortly after to assist the occupants of the other vehicle. None of the Tesla's occupants were hurt, but our submitter told us the driver and passenger of the BMW had both been using fake seatbelt clips to dismiss the seatbelt warnings, which didn't protect them at all, of course. The police called our submitter 2 weeks later to request his Tesla cam footage, which he provided. They also informed him that they suspected a third car had been involved in the incident. They told him a Mini Cooper had been racing the BMW, and when he checked his Tesla cam footage, he confirmed their suspicions. Our submitter told us if he'd been driving any other car, things probably would have been way worse for them. He's glad the Teslas are very safe, and this incident proves it. The repair bill came to over $32,000 US, totaling the car. With the insurance settlement, he immediately ordered a new one to replace it. Patrick was on his way to go rock climbing with his daughter in Charlottesville, Virginia. As he started to slow down for a red light, he glanced in his rearview mirror. That's when he saw a dump truck towing an excavator behind him that wasn't slowing down. Patrick swerved to the right to avoid being shoved into the vehicle in front of him. Sadly, he wasn't quick enough, and the dump truck slammed into the left rear corner of his Tesla. The truck then struck a Subaru stopped at the traffic light and pushed it into the intersection, only stopping when the dump truck got hung up on the crosswalk signal. Thankfully, nobody was hurt, and Patrick is really glad he checked his rearview mirror and took evasive action. Otherwise, he and his daughter would have been in a much worse collision. The driver of the dump truck said the brakes had failed and the truck wouldn't stop. Patrick contacted the police, and the responding officer determined that the dump truck driver was at fault. After a body shop inspected the Tesla, it was determined to be a total loss. Patrick received an insurance settlement 60 days later and ordered a new Model 3. Yayo was heading home after his daughter's soccer practice when they decided to stop for groceries so they could celebrate the great day with a nice home-cooked meal. As he stopped for backed-up traffic, Yayo watched in his rearview mirror as the driver behind him also slowed down. Suddenly, he watched the vehicle lurch forward. A large SUV rear-ended the car, pushing it to the side before slamming into Yayo's Tesla and shoving it into the pickup truck ahead of him. Yayo checked that everyone was okay before documenting the collision. Thankfully, nobody was seriously injured, and police were quick to respond. Yayo's initial repair estimate is over $15,000 US. But Yayo expects his Tesla to be totaled once the body shop sees it. Predictably, the SUV driver was uninsured. Yayo expected the insurance process to be a hassle, but even so, check out how happy Yayo looks in this photo his daughter took of him right after the collision. We've seen lots of wreck photos here on Wham Bam Tesla Cam, but we've never seen a crash victim looking so happy. Are you sure you're okay, Yayo? What day is it? Assuming you aren't concussed, great job keeping your spirits up, Yayo. Mel was driving to work on I-35 in Austin. He was in the exit lane when wham, then bam!
Tesla Cam, I hope you're satisfied.
The driver of a rental truck tried to squeeze between Mel's Tesla and the truck that was in front of him. The truck hit Mel's left fender and sent him into the concrete barrier with a reverse pit maneuver. The Tesla bounced off the barrier and headed back across the entire highway into the median barrier before the Tesla was damaged beyond drivability. With Mel now stranded, the rental truck kept right on going, leaving him behind. When Mel called 911, firefighters responded and so did paramedics, but the police never showed up. A tow truck came for Mel's Tesla before police arrived, but they did call him later. He gave them all the information about the truck, including the license plate number, but they never called him back. It's been over a month now, and Mel still hasn't heard back from the cops. He emailed the rental company a photo of their truck and an explanation of what happened, but they didn't respond either. With both U-Haul and the cops ghosting him, Mel does want to give the driver of the truck the benefit of the doubt and assume he didn't notice his large truck hitting Mel's Tesla. His car is still in the repair shop with an initial estimate of $14,000, but that might increase once they finally start working on it. Mel doesn't seem too upset about this, but we find it super frustrating. Why won't the police or U-Haul do something to hold the driver accountable? Norok was driving his Model S southbound on I-75 in Atlanta, Georgia, when he noticed a red Mitsubishi coming up behind him fast. After coming within inches of Norok's Tesla, the Mitsubishi driver swerved to avoid a collision and lost control. The Mitsubishi driver spun in front of Norok before smashing into a Nissan in the right lane. Both vehicles then crashed into a concrete barrier. Norok stopped and checked on both drivers after the Mitsubishi rolled upside down. Thankfully, both drivers were fine and able to walk away unscathed. The police quickly responded to the scene, and they were thankful when Norok gave them a copy of his Tesla cam footage. Norok told us he's not happy that the collision happened, but he is thankful his own car wasn't involved. This submitter was headed to Washington, D.C. with his mother during heavy rain when he started hydroplaning and lost control. The Tesla slid across 2 lanes and into the median, then hit a tree before stopping. Our submitter's phone summoned first responders automatically, and thankfully, a law enforcement officer that had been following a few miles behind stopped and checked on him even before the dispatched officers responded. When paramedics arrived, they checked on our submitter and his mother. Thankfully, they weren't injured. A tow truck ended up hauling the wrecked Tesla away. Our submitter filed an insurance claim the next day, and his insurance provider quickly decided to total his Tesla after the initial repair estimate climbed to $16,000. He doesn't know what caused the loss of control to occur, but he did tell us his tires were near their end of life, and he even had new tires on order that were scheduled to arrive just a week later. His insurance provider wrote him a check for $31,000, which he immediately spent on a used Model 3. Oddly enough, we can actually spot a trailer full of Teslas being transported in our submitter's Tesla cam footage. Mia is an Uber driver who had just dropped off a passenger at a shopping center and was crossing an intersection to pick up another passenger from a store across the street. She was almost completely through the intersection when, at the last second, she noticed the grille of a semi-truck approaching her at full speed. Mia's life flashed before her eyes, and she told us she thought it was all over. She tried to swerve before the semi hit her, but the impact pushed her into a vehicle in the left turn lane. All her airbags deployed, and she opened her door almost immediately to escape the powder from the airbags, making it difficult for her to breathe. A healthcare worker witnessed the collision and was on scene within seconds, assessing her condition and calming her down. A witness to the collision came over from the opposite side of the intersection and started saying Mia had run a red light. She immediately hit the dashcam button on her Tesla several times to ensure the footage would be saved, as it was the only proof she had that her light had been green. Mia was transported to the hospital and later released with some sprains and deep tissue bruising. After getting home, Mia reviewed her Tesla cam footage and discovered the trucker had made no attempt to stop. Mia thinks he must have been on his phone, as her light had been green for at least 6 seconds before the impact. Mia is convinced that if she'd been in any other vehicle, she might not be alive to tell her story. She's thankful to Tesla for building absolute tanks. On his way home from work, Chris accidentally drove through a red light before getting T-boned by a speeding Audi SQ7. Police responded to the scene. Amazingly, both drivers were able to walk away from the collision without serious injuries. Sadly, both vehicles were totaled, but what's really interesting is that both drivers were deemed to be responsible for the collision. The Audi driver was driving 15 miles over the speed limit at the time of the impact, and of course, Chris had run a red light. Chris's insurance provider paid him a settlement of $52,000 for his totaled Tesla. This submitter was driving his Model 3 in Plano, Texas. When traffic stopped for construction up ahead, the Honda behind him didn't. The collision ripped the Honda's front axle and wheel off and immobilized the Tesla. Both vehicles were stuck, which ended up being a good thing. Keep watching and you'll see what I mean. Our submitter called the police before tow trucks arrived to transport the vehicles. When the police checked the other driver's identification, they discovered something that prompted them to immediately arrest him. The police took off with the Honda driver before our submitter managed to get his insurance information. This left our submitter with a wrecked Tesla and a tow truck driver asking him a lot of questions that he didn't have the answers to.
Yeah, this is mine.
Will it move at all?
Yeah, but the wheel is jammed up, so...
I understand that, sir. What I'm trying to say is I got to get it off the road. I got to pick this one up first.
Okay.
Then I got to grab yours. But if it can move, then I can pick this one up and we can get it in a parking spot. We'll have to bring another truck out here.
Sure, that
All right.
whatever works. I
Yeah,
doubt it will move, but we'll see.
I understand. But we'll have to figure it out because I got to call a second truck.
Sure.
He did manage to get the police report number, so now he'll be filing a claim with his own insurance provider and including his Tesla cam footage as evidence. Sadly, this isn't the first collision this submitter's been in. Remember this one, when a Model 3 was rear-ended and had a rear wheel ripped off? Yep, same submitter. This new collision happened just a few months after he'd received his new Tesla. What are the chances of that? Chris was driving his Cybertruck and had just picked up his 6-year-old son Finn at school when he got stuck in stop-and-go traffic. While most drivers were participating in the stop-and-go traffic flow, one of them forgot about the stop part. The driver of the Toyota Tacoma behind Chris wasn't paying attention and smacked right into the back of his Cybertruck. Thankfully, the impact wasn't severe enough to hurt anyone, but the same can't be said of the other pickup. The Tacoma's front doors were wedged closed, and when Chris went back to check on the other driver, he discovered that he was trapped inside. Thankfully, Chris was able to help him pry his door open and escape. The other driver's first comment to Chris was that he had been admiring Chris's Cybertruck prior to the collision and didn't actually know what it was. Chris just told him he was about to be internet famous. Both of them agreed that the Tacoma had sustained far more damage than the Cybertruck. The driver of the Tacoma was very apologetic. He was fully insured and his insurance provider paid for the damage to Chris's Cybertruck. Chris ended up ordering new parts for $1,200 and fixed his Cybertruck himself in 5 hours, while the Tacoma had to be towed to a shop for repairs. Chris wanted to shout out his son Finn, who loves everything Tesla, including Wham Bam Tesla Cam, we assume. Alan was driving his Tesla early one morning during a downpour. The sun was also rising and the reflection off the wet asphalt was extremely glaring. Suddenly, Alan noticed the vehicle ahead of him slowing down, so he also hit the brakes. Sadly, the driver behind him didn't see what was happening and rear-ended Alan's Tesla at full speed. It didn't stop there. The road glare was so bad, drivers continued rear-ending each other, eventually culminating in a 28-car pileup that got national news coverage. Incredibly, a police car was driving right behind the Buick that hit Alan's Tesla, and this helped prevent any other cars from crashing into them. Sadly, it didn't do much to prevent mayhem further behind them. Once Alan got home and saw the incident being covered on the news, he realized he'd been near the very front of the pileup. During the news report, he was able to spot his own car on the screen. There it is, right there. The interstate highway was shut down for 3 hours while response personnel cleared away the remains of 28 wrecked vehicles. Miraculously, nobody was injured. That's gotta be some kind of record. Alan's repair bill reached $41,000, but when he filed a claim with the Buick driver's insurance provider, they said the $25,000 policy wouldn't cover it. Not to mention the damage done to the 2 cars ahead of him, Alan's own insurance provider had to step in and they totaled his Tesla. Julio was driving down a highway toward Hamilton with supervised FSD enabled. Pay close attention to the white car to the right of this truck, which the truck driver apparently didn't see. While Julio was passing the semi-truck on its left, the trucker began merging to the right. He didn't see the white car in his blind spot, clipping the back end. When he realized what was happening, the trucker tried swerving away from the car, but he overcorrected and lost control. Right then, Julio's Tesla began sounding the alarm while FSD did its best to avoid the out-of-control semi, which was now veering into Julio's lane. FSD steered as far to the left as possible, barely missing the median barrier. Julio hit the juice pedal and used his dual motors to accelerate away from the semi, which had managed to drag the white car across the highway and into the barrier. Julio and his passengers were fine, and his Tesla was completely untouched. Sadly, the same can't be said for the vehicles behind him. Nico was waiting at a traffic light. When it turned green, he began to slowly enter the intersection. His light had been green for almost 5 seconds when a Honda driver blew through his red light and hit Nico head-on. Nico's Tesla lit up every error message you can think of, and his car refused to move. After the Honda rolled to a stop, it was down for the count as well. Nico checked on the Honda driver and found out she was unlicensed and uninsured. He notified the police, and the Honda driver was cited for driving without a license and for driving without insurance. All Nico could do was shake his head while imagining the jingle,
Jump in! Honda bombed!
Pata had just picked up the Tesla Model 3 he bought at a salvage auction. He repaired the car enough to drive it and was tinkering around in the interior when he discovered it still had a USB drive in it. He went ahead and plugged it into his computer and found this video of a FedEx truck speeding through an intersection before slamming into the Tesla. It looks like the FedEx truck might have been unoccupied. Pata paid $12,000 for the car, and shipping it to Georgia cost him another $3,000, which includes the auction fees. He's budgeted $4,000 to fix it, which means he'll end up paying $19,000 for a rebuilt Model 3. Jerry was driving down Highway 400 in Canada when traffic ahead of him slowed down, but the drivers behind him weren't paying attention. The drivers of an Acura and a Mitsubishi both managed to swerve in time, only to reveal a Volkswagen Jetta before it smashed into the back of Jerry's Model Y. Jerry stopped and made sure everyone was okay, and the young driver of the Jetta was actually afraid of him as he approached. Jerry calmed him down and told him he wasn't angry, just disappointed. Okay, he didn't actually say that. What Jerry didn't realize was that his Tesla had automatically called 911 and sent a notification to his wife's phone. Firefighters and paramedics responded, but both Jerry and the Jetta driver declined care. Both of them filed reports at the collision center, which is when Jerry found out the Jetta driver didn't have comprehensive insurance, which would have paid for the repairs to his own car even though the collision was his fault. His insurance did cover the cost of fixing Jerry's Tesla though, $35,000. Completing the repairs took 2.5 months. Tobias was driving his Model 3 on Highway A20, a stretch notorious for pileups, and today would be no exception. He was driving in the right lane and could see from a distance that cars in the left lane were stopping. Suddenly, he saw the driver of a black BMW apply heavy braking before bumping into a gray Mitsubishi. Right after that, he saw the driver of a blue Model X braking hard, and he swerved right to give other drivers space to evade. That's when he heard a loud bang next to him. The Tesla Model X had stopped in time, but the drivers of 2 VW vans behind it didn't react quickly enough and shoved the Model X into the black BMW. The commercial VW vans were owned by the same company, so Tobias thinks this will end up causing some interesting conversations around the office water cooler. Emergency responders reacted quickly and closed off the highway for an hour while they cleared all the wrecked vehicles. Incredibly, everyone was able to walk away from the collision without serious injuries. Tobias noted the Model X took the brunt of the impact and was the most damaged of the involved vehicles. Danny was driving through an intersection with a green light when a Kia driver ran their red light. Danny's phone automatically summoned police to his location, and they arrived less than 2 minutes later. Danny went to the hospital to get checked out, but in the end, he didn't have any serious injuries. The same couldn't be said about his Tesla. His insurance provider quickly deemed his Model Y a total loss before cutting him a check for over $49,000 US. He told us he's already spent it on a new Tesla Model X. Ivan was on his way home from work when traffic ahead of him came to a complete stop. Ivan also stopped, but the Nissan behind him didn't. The Nissan driver was not paying attention and couldn't brake in time before slamming into the back of Ivan's Model Y. Both drivers stopped on the shoulder, and Ivan called 911 to report the collision. Even though he told them his back was injured, paramedics refused to respond, but eventually a highway patrol trooper arrived. Ivan tried to get the Nissan driver's insurance information from him so he could leave and go to the hospital, but the Nissan driver refused to give it to him. Eventually, Ivan asked the patrol trooper for help. He told us the trooper couldn't care less though, and he told Ivan that everything was in order and the Nissan driver wasn't required to provide him with his insurance information. Ivan was completely baffled. Then, when he later got a copy of the police report, he found out the trooper had lied to him. Ivan told us that everything was very much not in order. The report clearly states the Nissan's registration had expired and that the driver didn't have any insurance. Ivan is convinced the trooper hid these facts from him intentionally. Ivan doesn't know why he did this, but he has a theory. He overheard the trooper and the Nissan driver speaking to each other in another language, and he thinks they knew each other. Since the other driver was illegally driving without insurance, Ivan had to file a claim with his own insurance provider. Ivan is still getting medical treatment twice per week for his back injury, which he is having to pay for out of his own pocket.